This is Greg Pass with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today's date is September the 25th, 2022, and I am at the Tank Farm in Noakesville, Virginia. I have the pleasure to sit down with Orlando Pacheco. Am I saying that right?
Perfect.
Okay, what's your full name, Orlando?
My name is Orlando Enrique Pacheco Perez.
And where were you born?
I was born in Caracas, Venezuela.
And military veterans, do you have any in your family?
Yeah, my dad was in World War II, U.S. Army Air Corps.
Really?
Yeah, he's one of the few Venezuelans. He happened to be in New York City at the time, and he signed up when the war began.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is his story documented by chance?
No, it's not. It's not, and Dad didn't speak very much about it. It's pretty common among the World War II vets. Not much came out of him.
So at some point in time, you get in uniform yourself. What led to the journey?
Well, I think when I was a kid, I thought one day I'd be a pilot. And so I thought, well, that'd be great. Circumstances did not allow for that eventually, so I signed up. I enlisted in 1980, and then I received a direct commission in November 1981. And so I was going through university. I graduated through university, and after finishing my master's, I thought, there's this itch. I want to go into the service. It's always been there, and so I did. And they put me into military intelligence. I was a signal interceptor, monitoring Central American nets, especially Sandinistas. And that was very good, and so I submitted my packet for a direct commission. And providentially, I received it, and then I was sent to a number of intel schools out of Panama. I was part of the 193rd MI company, part of 193rd Brigade out of Fort Clayton, Panama. And then after receiving my commission, then I was sent to Fort Huachuca, and then Fort Devens in Massachusetts, and then my first assignment was in Germany, Augsburg, Field Station Augsburg, 2nd Battalion.
So, keeping in mind somebody might watch this video, they might not know what military intelligence is. Give us a Reader's Digest version of what military intelligence is and how that impacts the battlefield.
There's a number of layers of intelligence. I was at the signals. I was a commissioned as a signals intelligence officer, 37 series at the time, and we are in charge at the strategic level. You get a field station. At the tactical level, you get a number of units that go into the field and supplement the efforts by regular units to be able to identify and engage and destroy the enemy. So my job was at the strategic level at the beginning, because we were monitoring at, call it at national net levels, not at the tactical level. And in doing so, we were making sure they were transcribing 98 Gulfs in particular. And this is when I was enlisted. And then when I got, and we were we had intercept equipment, we had our typing, transcription, and then the analysts would work with it. Once I became an officer, they put me at the strategic level at Augsburg, and we were dealing with East German check nets. And we were just absorbing a lot of their signals intelligence and trying to see what the implications are if a war broke out. At the time, there was always the great fear that the Soviet divisions would be pouring in through the Fulda Gap. I was a second lieutenant, and we knew that our frontline units, Air Cavalry Regiment, the ACRs in particular, would receive perhaps 80% casualty. So we were motivated to make sure they had all the intelligence. They knew exactly the preparation levels of the adversary. We had quite a number of, and this is going to sound really quite amazing for Americans, but at least 100 units that would be 100 divisions that would be pouring in, combined Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, including entities such as not only airborne divisions, you had artillery divisions, something we do not have. Mm-hmm. So one little tidbit, with the Soviets...
Are their divisions smaller than ours?
Depends on circumstances, but I would say they're comparable at the time. But here's the point, is that they had made a calculation through their examination of their statistics on casualties that they had inflicted with their rocket and missile forces during World War II. At least 70% of all enemy casualties were due to those rockets. So if you look at a typical Russian commercial online, it's in Cyrillic and it's in Russian, or sometimes they don't even mention anything, they just show firepower. What do we show? Won't go into the details, but it's not firepower. Okay, you can read all you want into that. And so when they want to project their persona, it is, you're coming against us. We're going to shoot missiles. We're going to hit you with muscle. We're going to hit you hard.
Yeah, a little different.
A little different. So I'll leave it at that. So that was my business, the business of the battalion. And we had Czech linguists, German linguists, Soviet linguists, and I was in charge of my first platoon. And it was 117 members, company size element, but that's just the nature of a battalion at the time for intelligence at that level. So move on from there, I get a number of assignments, and then I enter into a reserve capacity. I get promoted, and I say, so well, I'm going to mobilize. And so I was on several missions, to include Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was a counter-terrorist analyst. I was a counter-drug analyst. I was an all-source analyst. What else was I? Yes, I was a foreign area officer, and my specialty was a 48J, which is sub-Saharan Africa. So foreign area officers, those are the guys that become attachés. So I was a reserve. In the reserve now, going from active duty to reserve, then I became a guy on standby to become an attaché, and I served as an acting attaché in Luanda, Angola, in 2002.
Sounds like interesting work.
It is. It's very interesting because you're in the embassy, and you have to make sure that the collections plan is well organized. You got a station chief who's a CIA guy. You have to sort of deconflict and then direct the mission on collections, and it can involve a lot of things. I mean, having gone through all of Southern Africa, you can be scouring Western Zambia, microwave towers, conditions of roads, apart from having your mill-to-mill contact with your opposite number. You can be in Luanda, where you're hobnobbing with a 2-star Portuguese general because it was a former Portuguese colony, and you've got the Russians in the room, you've got the French, and so you're actively, openly collecting in that. And they're doing the same thing with us. Just get atmospherics, where are the Americans coming from, where are the French coming from, and sometimes it's an opportunity to telecast exactly, let's say, as Russians, what we're up to, or what we want you to understand about our particular actions in this neck of the woods. So it's going through time, did a number of missions,
Real quick, let's back up 1 year.
Yep.
So let's back up to 2001.
2001.
So 9/11, where were you?
9/11, I was over, I was at the time working, let me see, 2001, I was in Molesworth, England. I was an all-source analyst, sub-Saharan specialist, and as an intel guy. And in this capacity, since I'm in the reserve force, that was my day job. And then for mobilizations, had a number of mobilizations, quite a number, and that would take me into a war, eventually, and including Latin American duties, counter-drug, back to Washington D.C. as a counter-terrorist specialist, and but at the time I was an all-source analyst at a place called Joint Analysis Center, Molesworth, England, and it was the former home of the 303 bomb group during World War II. That was the old airfield that was used to bomb Germany.
So, as a career officer in the intel community, 9/11 hits. What's going on in your mind on how this changes things?
Yeah. The thing. I'm sorry. Okay, clarification. I was not. I went from Molesworth, and I was selected for Command General Staff College at Fort Benning, Spanish language version. Last class, the first class after the School of the Americas, and so we were there. That week, it's a very good question. That week we were studying terrorism, and so we got a call. There were 60 officers in total. I was one of 23 American officers. There were people from Honduras, Peru, 6 officers from Venezuela. We still had contact with them at the time, and a number of other Latin American nations. First Nicaraguan officer in over 20 years because of the Sandinista connection. So that, we're in the middle of a class. He says, gentlemen, you need to go into the break room. And just a couple of minutes into it, we saw the second aircraft smash into one of the towers. And then the Latin American officer to the men said, may we offer our services? We are sorry. They knew that war had begun.
What's going on through your head? I mean, what are you thinking? How does that change?
At the time, is that they had contemplated my home unit back, which is Special Operations Command Europe, said contemplating whether we're going to pull you out of the course and take you back to Europe because we're going to be on war footing. But they said, look, let's not. We don't need that at this point. Let them finish his year course. Only has a couple more months to go, and they'll let me go. And so, at that point, I know that I'm going to be called at some point. And I would be, and that would be a few years later. Well, we go in a second time, obviously in 2002 we go into Iraq, connection with Afghanistan. Afghanistan's first. Iraq, I would not see duty in Afghanistan. I would see duty in Iraq.
Okay, let's jump to that then. So, at what point in time did you realize that you were going to be deployed to Iraq?
Right, I was working at Army International Affairs from 2006. Until 2008, and they're the guys who are in charge of trying to help and assist either in a variety of ways through expertise, and also sometimes we would translate for General Casey, who had been formerly, very, very recently, he had been our force commander in Iraq. And our job was always to maintain a worldwide situational awareness as to where the Army Chief of Staff needed to engage. But at the same time, we had guys that are being deployed downrange. So we thought eventually, it's not something that we would be, we wanted to enter into being able to be in that active battle space. So myself, I was selected as I think that at the time it's a worldwide augmentee that had sort of, I can't even remember the acronym for it anymore. And so my tour of duty was from about, it was August 2008 until February, March 2009. And then we went to Kuwait. I think we hopped over from Shannon. Well, we had all the preparations. Columbus. Then we were sent to, hop to Shannon, Ireland, land in Kuwait, processed there for a couple of days. Then we were airlifted into Baghdad, and there, just a short ride, was Camp Victory, same complex, Camp Victory, Baghdad, Iraq, a little bit west of the center of Baghdad, and just one little feature. It was a Japanese aircrew that took us in on a C-130, pretty capable crew, but you could see all the battle damage had been done previously. It really resembled the pictures where you see like a JDAM hitting the top of a bunker, and you realize these guys didn't have a chance. They were Saddam he couldn't pull back, and he didn't have the wherewithal to prevent us from just eventually overrunning. The campaign to Baghdad was 21 days roughly, just moving all the forces up there. But we saw just the immensity of the firepower that hit not only the airfield, but surgically. A lot of, even the Bath headquarters that was going up on that skyscraper, and you could just see all the way down to the first floor. It was hit with at least 2 JDAMs, and you realize these guys, bad idea coming against us. Really bad idea. Yeah. And so yeah, you saw it, but it wasn't indiscriminate. It was very surgical. You could see that. We didn't see a lot of damage thank God, in the residential areas.
Yeah. Were you married at the time?
Yes, I was.
Kids?
Yeah, we had at the time we had two children.
So that was how did your family take knowing that you were being deployed?
My wife was not too crazy about it, but she said, "Okay, all right, I know you want to go," and she had the wisdom to let me go. I had an option to say no, I don't need to go. Yeah, no, it was I was looking for the opportunity, and the opportunity came, and I volunteered to take a very specific slot, and I went.
So let's stop right there.
Yeah.
You said something that was very interesting to me. So again, keeping in mind that somebody watching this might not have been in the military, talk about how soldiers do think of a combat deployment as an opportunity.
Yeah.
What are your personal thoughts?
This is something which most Americans don't understand, because it's less than 0.5% that are actually in uniform right now. Small fraction. When you're working in the Pentagon at the time, it is one of the, unless you're in a particular line unit, you're actually doing a very active assignment. When you're in the Pentagon, you feel Army. You are immersed in a culture of Army. You still do your PT together. You literally, we're doing our unit PT through Arlington National Cemetery, where generations of former warriors have laid everything down, and you feel almost a shame if you're not part of it. And I'm wearing a uniform. I've got my flag. I don't have my combat patch. What's going on here? And you want to go in, and you realize there's a chance you won't come back, but the chances statistically are small. And I've talked to other veterans, even infantry. Yeah, I knew. I really felt strongly I wasn't coming, and even with that small statistic, you really felt like a little. It hits you typically that you may not be coming back. What are the implications? But put that aside and just go forward with the mission. But you wanted to go. Shame and honor were at stake. That's the simplest way I could put it.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right, so you got a view from the air on what's going on.
Yeah.
When you get on the ground,
yeah.
what's your assessment? How are the Americans working with the locals? What's
the vision that comes to my mind is that just as we're staging in Kuwait before we go in, the real impression here you see all the units sort of lined up. They're all waiting for their transport. And I said, these young guys are Sam Wilson, who was the 5th director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, World War II vet, and also others have seen the same thing. Dwight Eisenhower saw it with the paratroopers on the 5th of June, right before the invasion. They said that you see the light of war. How do you put it? The light of a warrior in their eyes. They're like biting at the bit. Okay, let me do what I've been trained to do. Okay, let me loose on the enemy. And they're there, all forming. It's like, okay, we're coming into country. All right, we've got to make sure we follow our standard operating procedures. All right, we're ready, and just move us forward. Just don't let us linger here very long. So that's the first thing that caught my eye. And I just saw all these young lives, And I said, man, I love these guys. Some of them may be scoundrels, some of them may be whatever, but they're ours, and they're willing to accomplish the mission. Then when you get into Baghdad, then you want to get a sense of what's the local sense. We had good cooperation, especially in my unit, which is Multinational Corps Iraq Reconciliation Engagement C3. We're a collection of foreign area officers. I mean, it really was, I don't want to use the word loosely, but really quite an elite group, from that particular specialization. And these guys had been all over the world. And if I could just one shout out for our commander at the time, we were both lieutenant colonels. He had been put on the promotion list, so he was going to be a colonel. Kohlmeyer, really good guy. He had done his graduate work in France, and you are of a common mind. You've seen his area was sort of East Europe, Russia. Mine was Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Then you saw another guy who was a Pacific, but they brought us all together with our different cultural and linguistic skills to be able to look at a different culture. And the Army did it well. You look at these guys through the eyes, you're sensitized to being to understand what these cultures are going to actually think and sense. What are their tolerance levels? What don't we get right? How do you need to approach them? So that's why we had a lot of interaction with the locals, but largely in the elite level. We had Iraqi Congress representatives that we made contact with, even at the ministerial level. We had the first, in the history of Iraq, inter-religious representation of minority tribes. In other words, the Sunnis and the Shia are the big boys on the block, but you had other subdivisions that had never had a voice. So you get those together, and it really affects Iraqi law. So we had, in our efforts, had Iraqi law affected or developed because of our input. Also, sheikhs from the Amari tribe up in the northeast, who pride themselves at being one of the first tribes that ride with Lawrence of Arabia, during World War I. There's tribal engagement down near Basra in the marsh area that had been flooded by Saddam years before and just denied a lot of traversing territory for the Iranian enemy from their perspective. We had Council of Iraq representative. There were, for example, 350 members, 350 to 375. We had contact with one of the 2 Christian representatives, which are the largest station up in the north. Most Americans don't understand there was a Syrian Rite or Chaldaic Rite Catholic community up near in the Tikrit area that periodically they would have either a priest decapitated or not. So we had to engage with 10th Mountain and said, well, get some patrols out there. I'll tell you exactly what's going on. This is not a fluke. This happens periodically. And then the foreign air officers are able to give them sort of a historic contextual understanding why you're seeing what you're seeing on the battlefield.
All these guys play well together?
Our job was that they play together well. And in as much as we could facilitate that and ingratiate and give them some resources, they did cooperate. But there's always a back, there's also a priority happening on the wings with the big guys that says, oh yeah, we'll cooperate you as long as you feed us the right materials, everything else. The day you guys are no longer a major player, it's payback time. So what is the payback here? You have a Sunni leader, and even though, I'll leave it simple. You have Saddam Hussein as a Sunni, who's in charge of a cadre who has governance over a majoritarian Shia population, but they're all Arab. And what happens if now the Sunnis are not in charge anymore? Okay, what have we historically paid because of that sort of arrangement? So there's things about what people carry in that part of the world is they have a very long memory. Okay, and revenge is part of the deal, And so you saw, in as much as that really doesn't lend itself to a lot of cohesion, but while we're the big guy on the block, we can sort of dictate a certain amount of cooperation, because they also know that they largely depend on their existence and maybe their political survival on their good relationship with us. So that's why you saw some really strong hesitation at just abandoning that mission. Not even talking about Afghanistan, which was extraordinarily bad. But I'll leave it at that. So yeah, we could get a measure of cooperation.
Living conditions. Where are you going at night?
Yeah. It's you're working 7 days a week. I mean, you get a sort of a half a day on a Sunday. And so we have the connexes, these. And since I was a lieutenant colonel, I got to have my own little room by myself, which was a luxury. And but one of the things, I've never been at a deployment where the food was so good. Okay, so the facts were.
Why is that? Why was it so good?
I think because they contract a lot of contracts, a lot of workers coming from the Philippines. But I'm telling you, this was like, if there was absolutely no way anyone could ever historically interpret that the troops were not well fed, but it was the quantity, but the variety of food. I won't go into it, but it included desserts.
So you came home 20 pounds heavier than.
No, I don't. No. I ran my 5 miles a day, so there's no problem there. Okay, so the thing is that if you're a line unit, and you're going outside of the wire every day, yeah, you're still going to do your routine, your PT, everything else. But us as officers, we've got to show example, and so I loved running my 5 every day, and so it kept me fit. Went to the red zone, on occasion.
What base are you at?
I'm sorry?
What base are you at?
We're at Camp Victory.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talk. What is that all? What does that entail? How big of a compound is this? What kind of
I can visualize the map in my mind, but let's say a couple of square miles, and you've got Camp Victory, and then you've got the Perfume Palace, which is the intel side of the house. And here I'm working as I'm a head of intel and research for Multinational Corps Iraq Reconciliation. I'm the intel guy within an operational outfit. So we're there. We're not in the intel, where it's more intel. And that's Perfume Palace, where you've got it's got a majority of intel operatives, and Al Palace, which was a palace in commemoration of the victory by the Iraqis. Yeah, okay, you can call it a victory against what they call the Persians, the Iranians, during the Iran-Iraq war down in the southeast. So this is a palace. If you look at the YouTube of it, it really looks quite impressive. but it's like all marbled, but it's about that thick, and behind the marble it's just, mortar and steel, whatever it is, concrete. But it was meant to impress. It had the best bathrooms we've ever seen, and which was interesting because we had Saddam Hussein's chapel as our office.
That's cool.
It was, and there we were. What are we doing? Reconciliation engagement. Trying to get the guys not to, cut each other's throats. Let's see how we can get them working together. Try to see common cause in a common enemy. So that's the sort of environment. Connex comfortable. The chow was great, including Indian, and if you wanted some. So I still smile. The last thing is you throw away your things. The last thing you take, before we did the day typically 9 o'clock at night. Started about 7:30 in the morning, and I'm taking my little Baskin Robbins ice cream, and I'm going to my hooch, and I'm just gonna, and I always had try to always have my telephone call with my wife, set time.
That was my next question I was going to ask.
Yeah, the comms were good, telephone. And we were given, technically it was supposed to be like 5 minutes, but it went longer. So it was increasing. So it went well. I mean, just delayed fear. Huh?
Access to email?
That's a good question. I don't recall very much. I think I did have it through Gmail. Yeah, but most of the comms was just, let's talk at night. Mm-hmm. But I compare that to former days, where it would be a letter, and you wait. Yeah. And here's the double-edged sword. If you couldn't make it that night, and there were occasions where you literally you got to go out, you got to go X amount of place, and you couldn't make it at 9 o'clock at night or whatever it was, the consequences were like, he's dead. Something happened to him. Mm-hmm. And everyone's trying to comfort you. He's okay. But that was a little painful, you might say, trying to allay your wife. Children, they really don't quite understand what's going on. They're pretty young at the time, so that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Mm-hmm. But that only happened once or twice. So I try to say it's okay. I have no choice. It might be a last-minute thing. Put on your armor, get into the MRAP. Out you go, or into reinforced Hummer, all that stuff.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So,
yeah.
So from time to time, you'd have to leave the relative
safety. Yeah.
But relative safety. What kind of measures go into leaving? I think there's a lot of pre-planning.
There is. We've got
escorts. How's that work?
Yeah, it's for us typically okay. There's a mission. You're going to meet a particular representative or a tribal representative, or you're going to go to the Al Rashid hotel where all the big people meet, and this is your schedule. Sometimes we'd be taken to the helipad, flown in, and then at the early time of the employment, that would seem to be the way of doing it. But there was a manifest, boom, you're on. Sometimes a ride would open up, okay, let's get on, boom, get in. But you could see the anti-aircraft maneuvers that were taking place, touch and go, always to keep the potential enemy off guard. And the chopper guys were great. I mean, they did it. Sometimes you didn't know when you were going to land because they're just hovering and doing their particular algorithm. I have absolutely no idea, but you couldn't figure it out. What was actually their routine on that one, just to avoid the enemy getting a sense that they got picked up on your pattern. If you're doing the MRAP or a reinforced Hummer, it's a little bit different. You get the manifest again, boom, you set up the convoy. And here's where it's important, where you strap in really well, because if you happen to run into an engagement, we had one service member, not my unit, but he didn't strap in well, so he paid for it. His jaw just got hit. His whole area was all smashed in, and he said it was my fault. I just didn't strap in because the thing can tumble and roll and everything else. So, but you realize you got a machine gunner on the top. The drivers are good, and you're booking into the red zone. Get to the embassy from the camp, and thank God, no incidences in the 6+ months that I was there. Through that entire area, going back and forth, and
what kind of gear do you have? A pistol, I assume?
Yeah. Every officer had his Beretta, and you had your body armor, helmet, chin strap, standard standard, nothing fancy. Sometimes groin protection, depending on what you have, and you just get strapped in, move through, and then one thing that they did is that make sure. One of the protocols standing out, the SOPs was okay. As you enter into the vehicle, make sure your weapon is clear, and you shoot into a barrel. If it makes sure that everything is fine, then holster it, and then you get into it. And I think the same routine as I don't think if they did it on the way out, I'm not quite sure, but at one point that had to be done. So there are no accidents because of a discharging weapon, and everything else was just machine gunner always looking both sides, going through. No, never received any incoming on that, which was great.
What about at your base? Did you guys get any?
We got mortared. Yeah, got mortared from time to time. Sometimes, the alarm would go off and we just hit the deck, and you couldn't hear anything. So it must have been on another part of the base, because this is where the Iraqis had learned. It was a heavy. The enemy was that. If you shoot at us, we had counter battery fire. So they learned, put the mortars on a timer, don't lose your crew. So
get out of it.
Yeah, that's correct. So you put it on a timer, and so it really affects their accuracy. So when we get the alarm, and the rounds are going to land somewhere, now we examine, hit there, it was a little bit from our place, from where I'm sleeping at night, but some guys will get hit. Casualties were relatively light in 2008, 2009. And I came in right after the surge of 2007. We were doing analysis on that. It was really a good operation, very smooth. Petraeus was running it. And then Odierno, I served under Petraeus and Odierno. Odierno was pretty good too. And Austin, who now is the Secretary of Defense, he was the number 2 under Odierno. I think under both. He was really good. Really, he had he had both the tone and the spirit of a guy who really was a good support officer to these two guys.
So when you think about your time on your deployment, are there any particular memories that stand out in your mind, whether frightening, funny? Every time you go on whether it's a recreational trip or a combat deployment, there's always a couple things that you instantaneously think of. What comes to your mind when you think about Iraq?
Well, what's popping into my mind is that it was a good mission. It was a necessary mission. It's probably the glue that's going to make it, if you can get the warring parties to work together. If that doesn't happen, it's business as usual when you leave. It's one thing, and just to have access to a Yamari chief who has royal bloodline with Fayed, who was the monarch after World War I of that neck of the woods, and you realize that they drove camels with Lawrence of Arabia, and you realize you're touching history at a fundamental level. These people take pride in their linkages that go back all the way to World War I. And then you're dealing with also connections with trying to facilitate with the United Nations, their folks that are in country, to try to have their programs and their service installed, and trying to facilitate some mobility for them with some of our air assets, transport in particular. Then you've got Department of State, who's also we're talking to, and also the Central Intelligence Agency on tribal engagement. What are they doing? What are we doing? How we can get synergism of that? All that was a dynamic that your creative sort of efforts had an impact on. And I take with great pride what my boss said, and General Farragut, meddled us appropriately before we left. But I mentioned about Colonel Kohlmeyer, and he said, Orlando, you left this place better than it was before you came. I really can't ask more than that. And I took that with great honor.
So at some point in time you come home. What was the homecoming like?
That's again a very vivid picture. I'm flying back. I get into BWI eventually. Oh yeah, and it's fun because it's called the Liberty Flight. So you've got all the space you want. It's these. I don't know how you can get an airline chair so comfortable. It's like being in a little lounge chair.
I don't know if I've ever had the luxury of doing that. Every time I'm in one, it's about this big.
This is really beautiful. I mean, and so you realize you've got like 3 hours, and you get one by yourself. And I remember we're lining up. The thing is that I had a tradition every time I'm coming back from a deployment. I remember this from Bosnia and Herzegovina years before. I have my little flag, and I just put it right there where the rear view mirror is, and I would just look at the American flag. And I said, okay, we've done our duty, and then going towards the airport. And so that was my little celebration. So we're there. They line us up. Here's where they weren't very specific, but this is more or less when you can expect your flight to manifest. Boom, everybody's here. Relax, and then they call us, and then we go in, and oh, you don't sit next to one? Fantastic. So it's really comfortable. The Alliance stateside, base commander is there to welcome you. Boom. And again, I think it was Jacksonville. Can't quite remember. And I remember the base commander just, welcome back home, welcome back. Each trooper just got out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm in the midst of, and I love this, amidst a bunch of these young infantry guys who looked at just had a club reunion, they're just coming off a deployment. And they're like a bunch of kids, they're having fun, and they've tasted, the brotherhood that very, I think it's very difficult to find in anything else but the military, and they really have, and they're coming back, and I'm sure they had wounded or dead among them, but they're coming back. So I get to observe these guys, and it's fantastic as an intel type or foreign area officer type. So I come back, we're all processed out, and then I get to BWI eventually. Oh, one last thing, as we were processing out, I get an opportunity to speak to the infantry that's going in. So I'm at the chapel area, going into service, giving my thanks to God. And it says, you'd like to say a couple words? And I did. I just got up. So it's just when you guys stay close to each other, stay close to the Lord, accomplish your mission. And they're listening, they're listening. And then moved on, get to BWI, and this is the image, which was great. There's my wife, I think 2 or 3. Again, it's fuzzy. My one, oh yeah. The youngest one is wrapping her leg around mom's. My wife's name is Rosa. And she's wrapping her leg around her legs as if I know this guy, but I'm not quite sure if I know this guy. All right?
How old was she?
She must have been, it's 2000, no more than 2 or 3. Yeah, 2005. Yeah, she's just about 3, and but she finally sort of, that's Daddy, and that was really so quite special. But just a group hug, and glad to be home. Glad to be home.
You opened a door. I'm going to run through it. You mentioned faith.
Yep.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
How does faith play a role in somebody who's overseas in a combat zone? How did that help you?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking.
No, I don't mind at all. It's an important point. I mean, if you're a person of faith and you believe you're trying to serve God, then you have an opportunity to show what it is to be a disciple of the Lord. You're supposed to be honorable, honest, transparent, someone that you can depend on. You're supposed to give your very best. And ultimately, you're giving it to the Lord. You're trying to say, look, I offer you this, and you use it in some way, Father. And you really want to be able to touch either young lives or your colleagues. I loved everyone that was around me. Incredible. They all had their stories, they had their challenges. Sometimes difficult when you get together with your boss and say, well, I'm having problems with this guy. But it gives you an opportunity to reach out with a hand of compassion, and then maybe a course adjustment, talk to them, give them. But you have that sensitivity. That faith is not just because you're scared you're going to die, or you're in a foxhole, there are no atheists. It's that you really want to make a difference in the performance of everyone around you, in their humanity, not to just see them that they're a problem, but there's an encouraging voice there. And then you do want to perform well. So, and I remember when we left, when you go home, they do a little, some type of, we had the T-wall, it says, it had a little coin in the middle. And the T-wall, for those who don't know what T-wall, it's a reinforced concrete barrier. It can differ in length, but it would basically seal off an area so that you can't really plow into an area and destroy. You've got, for example, an IED and a suicide bomber. So in this case, we get that, and I still hold that today. It's a beautiful thing. It says, sir, thank you for making a difference. God bless you. And some very sincere remarks on saying, you were human, and whatever makes you tick, we liked it. And so being a disciple of Jesus should make a difference if you're in the battlefront. If it doesn't, then the problem lies with you, or you're hiding it too much. And so I had the chief chaplain, who was he was the religious advisor to Odierno and Petraeus, and he said to me something I'd never heard before. He says, "You seem to be seamless about this. Some people will compartmentalize their faith, but there seems to be just a seamlessness back and forth, that it seems pretty natural for you." He said, "Well, if whatever you see in me, that's not my doing. That's the Lord's doing." So you can encourage, get a measure of wisdom. You also get a measure of insight. So I can't figure out this problem. So yes, the Holy Spirit, since you've asked me the question, directs you to things that you didn't even imagine. So even in my current status, working for DOD, I know that I have my limitations, but I can always turn to my Father and say, well, what am I missing here? And ultimately, you get the glory, you get the honor, because I want to do it in such excellence that they know it's not just ordinary work. It's something that's really good. So that's what motivates me.
Well said.
Yeah.
I want to dip back in time to Bosnia.
Yeah.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what Reader's Digest version
Yeah.
of the condition on the ground
Yeah.
at that point and your
Yeah.
role in that.
Oh yeah, it's a good question. And I'm glad you asked the question, because if you want to see devastation, I saw some in Iraq, but if you really want to, if anybody's interested in history and they want to look at pictures of Berlin during World War II when the Soviets are coming in, it was incredible. It's devastation all over the place. For those of you who are old enough, you may want to look at old CNN depictions of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and specific the capital city of Sarajevo, which would have like tracers and anti-aircraft rounds going into one of the skyscrapers. And then you would see all the high rises, because Bosnia and Herzegovina fragmented after Tito died. And remember, the wall came down November 1989, and by 1991 the Soviet Union is dissolved. Christmas Eve 1991, and now you see the Yugoslavs just fragment, and there's so many factions there. You've got what I call the Croatians. You've got Serbians, which have a great affiliation, strong affiliation with the Soviets, because it's a common religion. Croats are largely Catholic. And then another group which are called the Bosniaks, which are indigenous folks who are Muslims, same ethnicity, but you have to know a little bit about Turkish history, about why you have same ethnicity but Muslim. And then you have the Jewish population. And I talked to them, and I remember talking to them, and says, why are you guys fighting each other? And one of them told me, I can't really explain it. One day my neighbor was my friend. The next day I want to slit his throat. I can't explain it to you. But if you know a little bit of a history, is that I talked about payback earlier, and you had atrocities because even as 1987, Milosevic is talking about who would eventually become the head of Yugoslavia. He would say, remember the Battle of Kosovo, which occurred in 1387, where they lost to Ottoman forces. And so it says, we will avenge that. And then you have places like Srebrenica, in which 2,000 Muslims or Bosniaks or Muslim Bosnians were summarily executed and then buried. So you realize memories were very long, and it was an opportunity to take revenge. Even though they were living with each other in what they call the New Jerusalem, Sarajevo had all these communities that were living peacefully side by side.
Was your role in this similar to what you were doing in Iraq?
At that point, I was for a number of years supporting as an MI officer the J2 of the Special Operations Command. So I was technically the representative for Special Operations Command Europe, and so we were rotated in and out. And there, I got there in April of 1996. I-4 had rolled in December of 1995 under General Nash, who I would see later on. But we were engaging with pretty nice various entities on the ground, but also specifically Special Operations Forces. So we got to meet Hungarian Special Operations. We got to meet others. We went up to the Sava River. Hungary was right on the other side. So our job is to make sure that everyone is situationally aware and see how we can enhance our relationship largely. And if you needed special ops to be informed or needed to travel somewhere, for example, I as an MI officer and foreign area officer, I would travel with an A team all over the country and just touch base, with all, and including Spetsnaz. First time I ever met Russians, and we had to have put body armor on. That was one of the requirements as Americans, Camp Eagle, etc. But we were in Sarajevo proper, and but they didn't have any body armor because they were welcomed as heroes by the Serbians. Flowers on the street, you're our brothers, thank you for coming. And Spetsnaz looked like no nonsense sort of guys.
What's your impression about you hinted earlier about what it would have been like to go to war with Russia.
Yeah.
After meeting those guys or seeing those guys,
they're
pretty squared away?
They're pretty squared away. And the thing is that they're pretty squared away, but having worked among RSF, we're pretty squared away too. So it's like, okay, you're going to have a bit of clash of the Titans, but notice that if you're not aware, they've taken it on the chin against the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians, in large part, were trained by them. And Thucydides, one of the ancient historians, said, free men fight better than enslaved men, And so the Ukrainians knew them very well, and they were decimated. Typically the airborne goes in, Spetsnaz and airborne, and they usually take the objective. Not this time. They were waiting for them. And think about the casualties they've taken. So they're vulnerable too. If the intel's there against them, it doesn't matter. They don't care how well trained you're trained. I heard the same account when I spent a year in a place called Kibbutz Elata, which is in Israel. I was talking to war vets from there, and they said there was an Arab-Israeli war in 1973. I talked to the infantry guy, actually the paratroopers. He said, we saw a couple of Chinooks, carrying Egyptian Rangers right into our zone. And we put out a blanket of lead. We knocked them both down. And the way they looked at it was a terrible loss of good men. This is what the Israelis told me. They were so vulnerable, but they were all killed to the man. So the thing is that you can be very well trained, but intel could still kill you. They didn't have to face their opponents. They were already destroyed in the air.
Okay, I got a couple big picture questions for you.
Right.
All right. So you're retired now, Lieutenant Colonel. You had an Army hat on earlier.
Yeah.
We're at a military event right now. If you had a young kid, when I say young kid, 17-year-old kid, and he starts chatting you up about your military service, say, what I'm thinking about, enlisting or become commissioned. What advice would you give him or her on how to succeed in the military?
Okay. There's a couple of things I will say, and I'm speaking personally because my oldest is a 22-year-old, and she's a Marine. My 20-year-old is about to enter the Marines as well. Okay, and I know what it is with my daughter, and it's just a funny story. There is that I took her down to the recruiter. She had 1 year of university. She did fine, but there was a niche there, and there's a sort of a measure of steel in her, you might say. So I take her to the Army recruiter. She takes her ASVAB. If you don't know what ASVAB is, it's a series of battery tests to see your capabilities, roughly IQ equivalents, and more importantly, what jobs you qualify for. So she did well. So what she did, unbeknownst to me, she took the scores and then went to the Marines. And I asked her, hey, Bernadette, what'd you do that for? She says, Dad, I respect what you've gone through, but I want a tougher mission. What do I say to my girl? What do I say to my girl, and I look at her, well, I can't, there's no comeback on that one, And they do have the tougher boot camp. And she's paid for it because she got a fracture. As a female, even no matter what you say, those loads are not normal. and a lot of her colleagues also had to sustain certain fractures. My son, the other one, is a natural athlete. He'll do fine. He was first in Maryland as a pole vaulter, as a freshman, that type of thing. So, no, he's fine. He'll do perfectly fine. But he also wanted a tough mission, So I guess the Army's not tough enough, huh?
Who knew?
Who knew? Who knew? Yeah.
Last one.
Yeah.
This is the big one. All right, so we're videotaping this right now.
Yeah.
We're going to send you a video in a few months and give you instructions on how to submit it to the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you might have a great-great-great-grandkid that's going to watch this 150 years from now. What would you want them to know about your service? Before I ask this, actually, you're still working for DOD, so how many years service do you have? I have,
technically, entered military service, and then after that, so since 1980, so about 42 years at this point. Okay. It's still going.
So you got 42 plus years that you'll have. What do you want them to know about your service to your country?
It is worth serving. There's a big challenge right now with how we're going to maneuver through this sort of political environment. But in as much as you can see the service still honors the profession of arms, and you can be part of that, I would urge them to enter. And this is what you asked me in the previous question, what would you advise? I say for that young person is to make sure your recruiter's an honorable guy, because recruiters sometimes just don't quotas. Make sure, be completely frank with you, because I actually, I've also gone to Fort Knox to take some recruiter training on the officer level, so I know exactly what they're up to. Make sure they're honorable. Make sure you know your options. Don't let them, rush you into an MOS you're really not suited for. And if you're able to do that, you position yourself well. Whether you're going to make it temporary, just one enlistment, or you're going to make a career out of it. Don't go with the flow. Sometimes a lot of these young guys and girls, women, they like to gripe. It's just keep your eye on the target. Don't worry about the gripe. Just see it for what it is. Because the service offers you not only good opportunities, but you can excel. Like my daughter's, they're giving her responsibility above her grade. She's a corporal, and she may well make sergeant in her first enlistment. And so I tell her, honey, I'm very proud of you. You've done great, and you're the sure hands. You're the person they want to send out as the face of the Marines because of your good work. And that's exactly how they use her. It says Pacheco she's like the sure hands. Take her out there. She'll show the Marines for what they are. She's no nonsense, and her persona, and she's given me some insight on the office dynamics, knuckleheads type of stuff. People that have no idea why they've gone off, off the trail and everything else, but how to navigate it, and always know that you've got a family home that's proud of you, and you can always come back. You always got that sure, safe area, Family's proud of you. You've done great work. Carry on with the mission. Young person, there's no reason why you can't do that. You may not have a family, but seek a mentor. Seek a chaplain. There'll be somebody that'll be there who really will take interest in you. Don't just fall into any type of just gossip or complaining. That's not what you're there for. Okay? Yeah. And you may understand it, but okay. Work professionally. Eye on the mission, you'll love it. You'll love it, And I thank God that I had the opportunity to serve my country in uniform. Really, it's one of the hallmarks, of my life.
Fantastic and well said. Well, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime Museum, I thank you for spending time with us, and more importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Orlando,
Great
job.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that.